What's up, guys? Good Wednesday night to you. We are going to have a great show tonight, I believe. For those of you just joining us for the first time, I am your host, Corey Jeffers. This is the Mid-Ohio Catfishing Tournament Trail. Tonight, we are going to have RYAN BORTZ on. RYAN BORTZ is a nationally known name in the kayak trail. I believe he's won a couple times in a row. So it's going to be great to have him on. Once again, I'm your host, Corey Jeffers. This is the Mid-Ohio Catfishing Tournament Trail, and we will see you guys right after this message.
Well, grab your boat and boat. We're heading for a fishing hole somewhere in the state of Ohio. You may fish in Sandusky, but we ain't gonna count no muskie. It's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. You may drag out to Lake Dillon. It depends on how you're feeling. It's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. It don't cost much to enter. You may just be a winner. That's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. That's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. Come on down and join us, you hear?
All right, guys. Now we got with us RYAN BORTZ. Everybody welcoming in. Like I said, RYAN BORTZ is nationally known on the kayak trail. We'll say he's one of the best out there, but we'll leave that up to people to judge. What do you think, Ryan?
I think we'll let them judge that. Call Justin Johnson and ask him.
Well, welcome, Ryan. We're happy to have you. This is a show that's been a long time coming since I started this podcast. I've always said I was going to have you on. Obviously, you and I go back to my very first tournament ever when I fished that day with Matt Jones. Did we lose you?
Did I freeze or did you freeze?
Somebody froze. But as I was saying, we go all the way back to my very first tournament ever when I came down to Taylorsville Lake and learned that there's no catfish in there with Matt Jones. So outside of that, I think you whooped us today right in front of the boat ramp.
Yeah, I actually didn't have but one fish in the live well for that.
We're losing Ryan again.
Yeah, I'll have to relocate.
We're on the move. All right, you relocate. We'll come back to you. All right, well, Ryan gets everything fixed up. We'll say hi to everybody in here. We got Dog Annie Outdoors, Catfishing Chaos, Cat Tucky, Aunt Pam, Tamara. What are you guys up to? Thanks for joining in. Ryan is relocating. He's got some bad service. Did you guys all catch the intro video to this thing? I thought we did a pretty cool job of making that intro video. Ryan, when you're ready, just give me a thumbs up. Back in his truck here. I can see him. Looks like he's putting it on there. Bumping Mike Greenwell in the house. How you doing, Mike? I finally started adding these lives to the River Catfishing channel. I don't know why I wasn't doing that before. Ryan is almost ready. I can see him getting ready there. Just waiting for the thumbs up and bring him back in. He was in his shop. Didn't have very much service. All right. We got a thumbs up. All right, we are back. Ryan is back in the truck. Looks like we got a little better service now. He's not freezing. So for those of you guys that are just jumping in, our guest tonight is RYAN BORTZ. He is the current national title holder on the online catfishing tournaments national kayak trail. So today we're going to discuss fishing new water and finding big fish, which Ryan seems to have a handle on.
Sometimes. We'll say sometimes. We'll start out just like Taylorsville Lake. You mentioned it. That lake is different than anywhere I ever been. Most of the time there, if you see me out there, I'll be in 10 foot or less of water. I like to fish the shallow mud flats because that's where the bait's at, and that's where fish move up to feed there. But you can also pull boards and suspend in the thermocline. I mean, and neither one's right nor wrong. I mean, I'll say that. I was beat by, I think I finished 10th in that tournament that night you were talking about. There was 9 other people beat me that was pulling boards in the thermocline, But had I changed what I was doing before the last hour of the tournament, I
Right.
may have been right there with those guys. I made a run all the way to the other end of the lake to fish a mud flat that had been producing for me, and I mean that's my home lake, so I should be better there than anybody, but that's not the way it happened. But every place you go is different. So one place I start when I go, so if I'm going somewhere I've never been, first thing I do is hit avionics. I mean that's what anybody should do in my opinion.
Right.
I also use the C maps on the Lowrance app. I use that. Sometimes it's more right than the avionics. It just doesn't matter. One place to the next will change. So you just kind of have to look at both of them and be prepared for both of them. The Ohio River, I'll say this, I've never seen one that is accurate up there.
None of accurate. I don't know how many times I'm driving back to the boat ramp on the Ohio River, and by the time I look down at my ranch, it says I'm driving on land, and I'm out in the middle.
I'll look for creek mouths on avionics. That's a big spot for me. Ledges, hard ledges. This time of year, I'd be looking for a deep hole, and it doesn't just have to be deep water. You can have a 2-mile stretch of river that's 70 foot deep, and a deep hole in that would be 100 foot. Right. I mean, you're looking for the deeper spot where the water stays more consistent is what I look for. I also look for places where bait's going to gather close to that. So you need the bait, you need the consistency in the water temperature, and I like to have a back creek because if the river gets up and takes off to raging, those fish like to push up in back creek. So if you can find all three close together, that's usually a recipe for success. I'll put it that way.
Right. Well, and that's what I looked for a lot when I was on the national trail fishing all over the country. I never went down and pre-fished. And I know it's a little different for you guys on a kayak. You got to pre-fish because you don't have the option to just pull up and move like we do on a boat. So I did all of my pre-fishing on my phone. I would study avionics for weeks and weeks and weeks. Like I said, the luxury I have over you guys is I didn't have to fish it. I didn't have to go there and fish all those spots because if I sat there for 30 minutes, didn't get a bite, I had the option to move 5 miles downriver. You guys just don't have that option.
And that's actually what I was doing when you guys caught that big fish in Louisiana. I was sitting there on my phone scrolling through. I can't even remember where I was at on there now, but I was scrolling through avionics for our tournament series this year, and I'm the world's worst about answering a phone call in the first place. But Chris, when I seen that FaceTime pop up, I'm like, oh, what have they done? I thought they've either crashed the boat or they've caught a monster.
Well, we did both of those.
And Chris, when he first showed me that fish, I was like, well, that's not that big. And then he put the phone down where I could get a better view of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, they got a hog. I didn't think it was anywhere near as big as it was even then. I thought it was a triple-digit fish, but I didn't think it was going to be state record, and that was actually amazing that just Chris thought enough of me to, hey, I'm calling Ryan as soon as he got the fish,
Yeah, I mean, you sold the video. He didn't skip a beat. The second the fish hit the boat, he called you.
Yeah. I was joking with Mike. I was telling him, I said, Chris had me on the phone before they had the fish in the boat. He was already calling me before the fish ever hit the deck.
Yeah, the second I called a sea turtle, he was thinking about you.
Yeah, and me and Chris, we put in some time last year together. I mean, we really did. He stuck with me every tournament, everywhere I wanted to go. He was there. He really put in the time, and I felt good because Chris was trying to learn from me. You get a lot of people that ask questions, but they don't want to really learn. Chris was willing to go out there and put in the time and learn. And people will ask you a million questions, but until they experience it on the water, it's just words. And then once they experience it on the water, especially if you're explaining it to them while you're doing it, because one of my things is people said, well, how do you do so good in these tournaments? And I'm like, honestly, half the time I'm out there freaking winging it,
We all are.
And I mean, and that's the truth. Like I went to Kerr Lake this year. I'd never been there. I knew that if I was going to get a triple-digit fish from the kayak last year, that was probably the place it was going to happen. That was one of my best shots. So me and the wife planned a whole vacation. We went down for 9 days, and I probably spent 80 to 100 hours on avionics. I didn't even need a lake map to tell you what the bottom looked like where I was at by the time I got there. I knew where I was at basically and what I was doing before I got there. And I talked to a few people. I know Tim King. I don't know if you know him or not. he lives in the area. I actually was going to fish with him and was afraid people would kind of
Oh, we lost him again. There you are. You were going to fish with him. You were going to fish with him, but people were what?
I was afraid people may say something about it, because he's a guide. So I kind of backed out on fishing with him, but he came up and gave me a few pointers, and I'm like, well, here's what I've got picked out to start with on Navionics. And he's like, everywhere you just pointed out is places that I would check before I hit this tournament. And that made me feel good. So when I got out there on the water, and bait was terrible. It was horrible trying to get bait down there for me. I'd never caught a white perch before, so that was a learning experience. And
I catch them all the time in Sandusky, but they're trash fish.
Yeah, and so I finally got out there and got some bait, and went out, pre-fished. I caught some fish. I caught more bass on cut bait my first day down there than I did catfish, and I'm like, well, this ain't the ticket. And I was trying to fish it like Taylorsville, but just because it was right beside where we were staying. I mean, I didn't even take my rods out of the rod holders in the kayak to put in at that boat ramp.
Wow.
And I was like, well, this ain't working, but I had a couple of bass for bait, so I was all right there. So I just went and started hitting spots I'd picked out on Navionics, and every single spot that I had picked out produced fish. So pre-fishing actually hurt me. Pre-fishing there, every spot that I went to produced decent fish. So which one do you go to at that point? I had 9 spots. So tournament night come up the night before the tournament, and I'm like, everybody's like, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm debating on making this 5-mile run because that's where I marked my bigger fish that I didn't catch.
You mean a 5-mile run on the kayak?
Yeah, that's my line. A 5-mile run is my line. That's my cutoff limit. One direction from the boat ramps, 5 miles.
Is that an
but
hour?
If you think about it, that's just an hour, on the kayak, because you're doing 5 to 6 miles an hour, so it's not that bad.
Sheesh.
I mean, you wouldn't think anything about making an hour run in your boat.
I did it at Rising Sun and got skunked.
You wouldn't even think about it. That's just a regular run basically. So I was wanting to do that, and everybody else is like, well, I'm putting in here, I'm putting in here, I'm putting in here. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to go here. And I'd caught fish there, I'm just going to go here and drag to the 5-mile point, because if I drag that at 0.5 miles an hour, that puts me at 4 miles, for the day. So I would have ended up in the same spot anyway. Well, where I started dragging, I was just killing them. And I went about an hour without catching a fish. So I just turned around and went back the other way and dragged it again. And I dragged the same stretch over and over and over again, and ended up taking second in that tournament. I think it was 2 inches was the difference in me and Justin.
That sounds like a Chris Minahan plan. That must be where he learned it, because he'll do the same thing. He'll drag the same 100 feet all day long. He'll go drag 100 feet.
If I'm getting fish and marking fish in that same area, I may drag the same 1/4 mile stretch all day for a full tournament. But the minute I quit marking them, or the minute they quit biting, that's when I start moving somewhere else. It's plan B at that point.
Catfishing Chaos wants to know how many days you typically pre-fish before a tournament.
Like Kerr Lake, I was there for 8 days before the tournament. Some of the ones in Tennessee, I'll do 3 days. I mean, I have showed up at tournaments and not pre-fished at all. Got bait the night before and go out and win a tournament the next day.
See, on my adventures, that's how it is. I just don't have the time because I'm so busy with work. I hardly ever have the time to go down early. Even when I was fishing on the King Cat Trail, I couldn't find the time to go pre-fish. So just like what you said, I'd get down there a day early, and he went dark on us.
Yeah, my light went out for some reason. There we go.
But even on the King Cat Trail, I wouldn't have time to get bait, so I'd go down there and fish. But we have a ton of questions here. Catfishing Chaos wants to know if you use a 24-volt motor.
I do. I switched to a 24-volt motor guide this year, or the end of last year, and I'm running that off of a Amazon. I think it's an RV battery. It's a 24-volt 100 amp hour it's an RV/solar battery. It's not even got a name. It says something like DL something on the side of it for the brand.
I switched to the Amazon Power Queen batteries, and I just bought 2 more. I mean, we took in things in Louisiana and ran 2 full days on them and never ran out of power. So, guys, real fast, I've seen a lot of people hey, what do we have here? I've actually ran this show since the day I started the tournament trail. I just never tied it to river catfishing. And I realized last week that I was seriously missing an entire audience because my tournament trail page has like 12 followers and my river catfishing page has over 100. So I figured I would link in the river catfishing page, which that's where a lot of these guys are coming from. It's been on Facebook and on the other page for a long time. So I just now realized that I should link it to the river catfishing page. But let's run down through here and say hi to some more people I got in here. We got Pontoon Jody in here. We've got Muskrat Adventures made it in. Catfish Fever and Outdoors. Cool Cats Fishing got in here. Fish Shizzle got in here. Said hey to you and I. Aaron Grubb made it in. Cat Tucky. Trophy Seekers Outdoors. Let's see. Am I missing anybody? And Paula Hood just made it in. So I did see that Roger asked, do you find that you're catching more fish in one direction over the other?
Occasionally it happens that way. We was talking about Kerr Lake. So me and Justin Johnson were literally going to where we were beside each other and turning around and dragging the opposite ways of each other. He was catching fish coming toward me and I was catching fish going toward him, but neither one of us were catching fish going the opposite way. So they were hitting for him when we were going at each other and they were hitting for me when I was going toward him, which was two completely different directions.
Right.
But I mean, he was literally stopping where I was starting and we were going the other way and we'd turn around and we'd come back to each other.
Well, you didn't have 5-day-old crunchy crappie. That was the problem.
The bait situation there was kind of crappy. We had some crappie that we were using, but down there they still have to measure the legal limit to use them.
Okay.
So you can cut one, but it still has to measure, I think it was 9 inches or 10 inches down there. You have to
That's the same thing we have in Ohio. It's got to be the legal size.
Yep. And it has to, if you cut it, it still has to be 9 inches long, you know? So I was cutting it 9 inches long and running double hook rigs and thinning it down to where it was kind of a skipjack shape, but it was a chunk of crappie.
Okay.
So what I had left went in the lake because I didn't want nobody to see that. You can't get caught with that piece, but you can get caught with the piece of it that was still full size.
I see. That makes sense. Like you're in Ohio, it's the same way.
And actually when we ran out of crappie, that's when we quit catching fish. So
I was just joking. I was just joking about the crunchy crappie because anytime I watch one of Justin's video, he takes this 5-day-old crappie or yellow bass that's so crunchy you can step on it and hear it, drops it down in a 100-foot hole and catches big fish. Every video I watch.
That's the Tennessee River for you.
Brandon said it's time for you to bring him his belt. We all know who the real king is.
I'm going to bring it down there with me, but just so I can show it off to y'all as I drive back to Kentucky with it this time again.
Shout out to Man Rose. This is Jamie. He actually wrote the song that I opened the show up with. I will close the show with the same song for you guys that didn't get a chance to see it. It's a pretty cool song. I put some pictures to it. It makes a pretty cool intro. We're going to use it on here, and then we're going to use it in some way. We're getting real close to getting a deal signed so we can have a TV show this year. It will also be the opening for our TV show for the tournament trail. So I just wanted to point that out. Ryan, why don't you give us a background on your catfishing experience? You know, everybody seems to like to know when you're at the top, they want to know where you started. How'd you get there?
So I started like everybody else catching bluegill when I was old enough to hold a fishing pole. I mean, there's literally pictures of me at a year old with my papaw bluegill fishing in a pond. You know, I mean, I wasn't even big enough to stand there by myself. And on up into high school, I got a little John boat, you know, and we hauled that thing to school every day, and there'd be 4 of us in that 12-foot boat. It's actually still out here at my shop now. And we would haul that thing to the lake after school and be out there, and I don't know how we hadn't sunk it, to be honest with you. We'd have so many people in it, but that turned into, throughout my later in high school years, we had got a bass boat, and we fished some bass tournaments, and then I made some poor choices in life and ended up being hooked on drugs and running that hard road for about 15 years. And during that, I kind of gave up fishing and just kind of got away from it. And I came up here to where I live now in Willisburg and went through the Isaiah House. And the first thing I did when I got out and went into a sober living program went to a Walmart and bought an ugly stick fishing rod and went to a pond the same day.
Huh.
And I actually, that's still my bait rod to this day. It's 7 years ago, I think it is. Still use it for my bait rod today. And I was getting back into bass fishing, you know, a little bit. And then one of my buddies that I worked with, he had a kayak. And he said, man, he said, why don't you come kayaking with me this weekend? He's like, the wife can't go. You know, they both had a Sin 12T kayaks. So I go out with them and we kayak fish and had a big time that day. And he's, what do you think about it? I'm like, man, this is way better than standing on the bank. You know, I mean, we had a ball. So he goes out and he calls me one day. He says, I'm at Walmart and I'm thinking about buying an extra kayak. He said, would you be interested in using it some? I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'm so interested. I can't afford to buy one for myself, but I'll put $100 towards it. And he rolled in that night at my sober living house with it strapped to the roof of his wife's SUV. He said, well, what do you think about that one? I'm like, it looks like it'll get the job done. It was a Tamarack from Walmart. He said, we'll go try it out this weekend, see what you think. Well, we went out and he said, what do you think about that kayak? And I'm like, man, it's just as good as the one you got. It floats and gets us there. So he said, well, I'm glad you like it. You owe me $200 more. And I'm like, we're going to put that on a payment plan. He said, well, that's kind of my plan. He said, but if you screw up and you go back out into the dope world, I'm not giving you your money back. He's like, you just lost whatever you paid me. He said, so this is kind of my way of keeping you straight. And
that's awesome.
So I took that, and a couple months into using that, I got out and I was bass fishing with chub minnows up next to some bushes. And man, I was just wearing like 10-pound channel cats out that day. And I posted them on Facebook. And the originator of our tournament trail, Anthony Shane Waldridge, he was into kayak catfishing. So he hits me on one of my Facebook posts and he's like, hey man, we're having a free kayak catfish tournament down here. Come down and join it at Taylorsville. And I'm like, nah, man, I'm a bass guy. I was just posting them, you know, as a joke kind of. And he's like, well, it's a free tournament. You got nothing to lose. So I took my little brother and another buddy of mine. We went down there and fished it. I won this tournament with 4 channel cats. I think I totaled up like 62 inches, which is like 15-inch fish. They were dinks, you know, they weren't even eaters.
Chris don't even put those fish on the board. He just throws them back.
Yeah, I mean, but it was enough to win that tournament. And there was like 20 people there. I mean, it was one of the bigger kayak events I've ever been to. We had some gift cards that he had got donated from Bass Pro, and a couple people had threw in some fishing rods they'd went and bought, you know, and just a get together is all it was really. Well, here I am. I win this tournament. So, you know, I'm strutting around the boat ramp after it's all said and done. Like, bass guy done come down here and whooped y'all at your own game. And he said, well, now that we've got you into it a little bit, he said, come down here with me this next weekend and we'll put you on some real fish. Well, he takes me out the next weekend and I hook into about a 25-pound blue cat from that little cheap kayak with a bass rod. And the fight was on. I mean, it was a 30-minute ordeal. And we got back to the boat ramp. He said, what do you think about this stuff now? I'm like, we ain't bass fishing next weekend, if that's what you want to know. So shortly after that, COVID hit. We had a couple more free tournaments. And they won't let us do tournaments at the boat ramps anymore. But it's legal to still do online events. So we go onto our little Kayaks and Cats Facebook page, and he would start a post and pin it at the first of the month, and we would submit our fish in the comments section of that. And then at the end of the month, Shane would go through and add up everybody's 5 biggest fish, which was after a couple of months, I started helping him do all this
in the dark.
And I realized that this is not the way you do this, but it's fun and we're doing it. I mean, we were doing like $20 entry fees and we were having a blast. I mean, we really were. There was probably 10 of us that were in every one, and competition was hot. I mean, we were out on top of each other. Many of those tournaments was won in the last hour of a month-long event, you know?
Right.
And we had it only for Taylorsville Lake. You can only fish Taylorsville Lake. Is the only place you could fish. Well, then a couple other guys from Barren River Lake wanted to start getting in on it. So we made it, the state of Kentucky can do it. Well, then a couple of guys from Ohio started wanting in on it, and then a couple of guys from Indiana. So we made it the regional scene. And then about that time is when Kayak Mike started getting involved. And he's like, "Oh, you guys are doing this the hard way. Like, let me make a spreadsheet and help y'all keep up with this." We're like, "Absolutely. You know, we don't want to spend 3 hours on a midnight on the first of the month trying to add up these scores." So Mike starts updating this list once a week and making a post of it. That turned into, we were using Tourney X for a little while, which was, it's another online tournament thing, and I do not like it. They eat up a lot of the money that's put in for the prize money in the pot, and it's just a deal. Like, out of $100 tournament, you'll probably get a $50 payout, you know, if you've got $100 worth of entries. And then there was some drama in one of the other tournament scenes, which was a national online scene. And Mike's like, "You know what? We're just going to start our own national trail." So we had the regional, and then the national group started out of that. And then last year, Mike decided to do an in-person Ohio kayak trail. And we did that, and that was kind of a trial thing to set the stage for what we did. Or no, it's 2 years ago we did that.
22, right?
We did, yeah. For 23, we were doing a trial over the state of Ohio. And I think we had 5 or 6 tournaments in that. We had, you know, a couple on the Ohio River. Hoover was one. Sandusky was one. Cowan Lake was one. I think we did Grand Lake St. Mary's for one. Well, I ended up winning that. And you know, I didn't let any of those local Ohio guys live that one down whatsoever. And then Mike said, "Well, that went really well." He said, "So we're going to do a national trail, and we're going to make a true national trail. We're going to travel all across the eastern half of the country and do this trail." And that's where we're at today, you know, with, I don't even know what the payouts are this year, but they're going to be some of the better payouts even in the boat world, you know, as far as what you bring home from a tournament if you win and get big fish. And
well, so it looks like, so I got the liberty of fishing my first ever kayak catfish last year in Sandusky, and I'll tell you, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I learned that spot lock is a must. Ryan put me out there with an anchor. I about got killed by a jet ski. But, I mean, that guy, I wish I'd have had the video. It was on my live, and I never went back and saved it. But that jet ski was so close. I stood up on that kayak and hit him at full speed with my rod. That's how close I was. Right across the chest. I'm like, "Dude, if I can hit you with my rod, you're way too close, you know?" Yeah. And he started yelling, and then he drove off. He didn't want any more. But I learned real fast that anchoring in Sandusky is not a good idea. I would have much rather just been drifting around because I couldn't pull that anchor fast enough to get out of there. So
well, I rarely anchor on a lake anyway, but Sandusky, I don't think I had a motor the first time I went up there. Normally on a lake, what I would do when I'm in a lake situation or somewhere like that is, if I was paddling, I'll go all the way up into the wind as far as I can go, or as I want to go. And then I would let the wind push me the way that, you know, I was going to drift, and I would use a drift sock to control my speed. A bigger sock would slow me down more. A smaller one, I would get more speed. And that was kind of a headache, but it worked. And once we got XI3s, man, that was
game changer.
Game over. Like, I'll never paddle again for a tournament. If I'm paddling, it's because my motor's quit.
Right. Jody wants to know who's better at catching skipjack, Ryan. Him?
Jody, I caught skipjack on planer boards when I was with you, so I wasn't even holding the rod and was catching them.
Jody, James, Daryl, or Fish Izzle? You weren't even in there.
I'm not even in the. I'm gonna have to go with Jody. Yeah.
Catfish Fever put a pretty cool comment. He says, "Ryan, you're an inspiration. I was an alcoholic for years. Took fishing and goals seriously and on the right journey now." That's cool, man. Keep up the good work. That's awesome that Ryan could be an inspiration for you guys. Lyle made it in. I saw that. Everybody in here. Aaron Grubb, Catfishing Chaos. They were talking about the good old days as you were talking. Sorry, as you talk, I read these comments and I pick which ones I'm going to put up there for you to see. I don't know if you can see them or not.
I can't make them out. My eyes are not that good, so.
Ponsoon Jody says, again, news you did the first time. Don't you remember the 40-pounder I caught while I was asleep?
She's always asleep.
Dang, Jody, you gonna let me talk about you like that? And she was cheated out of the biggest fish at the first gathering. She had a 51-pounder.
I didn't see it. Video where it didn't happen. That's where we're at now in the fishing industry.
Video or didn't happen. Jeffrey, welcome in. We appreciate you guys. So, guys, if you guys are just tuning in, I do this show weekly. I was doing it on the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament page. I just included the river catfishing page because thanks to Lyle, that's where all my followers are coming from. I will tell you guys, though, I did make a purchase that's so my YouTube page is gonna get going here. People keep begging me to do it. One thing about this show here, it's for the tournament trail. We usually interview the winners throughout the winter when we're not having a bunch of events. I find guys that I know are influential guys in the catfish community. One of them, obviously, being RYAN BORTZ. So we invited him on. That's where we are tonight. We're talking about kayak catfishing, how to find big catfish on different lakes, as well as Ryan just kind of giving us the backstory of what makes him a successful angler. So we appreciate you guys all coming in. Ryan's told a fantastic story so far. Let's go back to that Sandusky event. So I borrowed your kayak, busted my window out, had half a charge battery, all my bait died. We went out looking for bait, busted the cavitation plate on my motor, threw you and Trevor off the back of the boat.
Yeah,
that Sandusky event was one for the ages. And
that was probably the hardest I've ever worked to get bait in my life. And we had the most fun anybody's ever had throwing a cast net. I swear you can't replace that stuff.
Let's not forget the lady at the boat ramp. They couldn't get their boat on the trailer. They pulled out and their boat was sitting half off the trailer. Chris was going to get out and go fight that guy at the bar. Like it was.
The lady at the boat ramp was ready to leave her husband and go with us because he couldn't load the boat.
The only shad we caught all night was right there as they're yelling at each other because he can't load his boat on the trailer. Chris said it was a good time.
We got one bass and a shad and about 3,000 throws of a cast net. We ran the boat up on the ground.
Well, we did run. He said, "Hey, the water's getting pretty shallow." I'm like, "Oh, we'll get out." And you're like, "We're not in water anymore." Look over the boat, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're not in water anymore." Ran it up on the shallow end at 30 miles an hour.
And the bad part about it was there was actually buoy markers marking that big mud flat to stay away from it.
Yeah. Some of us wasn't paying attention. Muskrat says this is the best case scenario. We can hear Ryan, but we can't see him. Pontoon Jody says they're going fishing Friday. That I'm about to die. It's been 10 days since I fished. I'm feeling you. The last time I went fishing is when we caught that fish in Louisiana. We were supposed to go last week to Louisiana. Couldn't go due to some work stuff. Supposed to go this week. It's going to be storming there all week. I'm dying.
I haven't even been out catfishing at all since the first of the year.
Did you even catfish much last year? You fell off the face of the earth after the kayak national championship.
I would say I averaged about 20 hours a week last year, something like that. Not near as much as I did the year before. And I've kind of took up crappie fishing. This live scope, man, it's addicting chasing them crappie with that live scope. I'm telling you.
I've heard all about live scope from these kayak guys for the last week.
Yeah, we've got a couple that are against it. So
let's, you know what, we touched on it. Let's go there. So in my personal opinion, I don't know if everybody saw, but one of our sponsors bought us live scope for the boat this year. I was complaining about not being able to catch bait, and that is my only intention for the live scope, just to be able to catch bait. And it's not just a couple guys in the kayak world. There's guys in the boat world that don't like it too. Me and Chris fished a total of, I think, 34 tournaments last year. We fished several doubles and triples. I mean, we would start on Thursday night and fish 2 or 3 tournaments for the whole weekend. And at the first tournament, we wouldn't have any bait. We'd have to go find bait when the tournament started. At the second tournament, we were using leftover bait from the first tournament. And by the time we got to the end of the night on the third tournament, we were just completely out of bait. A lot of times guys would show up to the ramp at my tournaments. They wouldn't have any bait. So I'm like, hey, I got, like, even with Sean Dolphin a couple times, I'm like, I got 5 pieces of bait. I'll give you 2. I keep 3. And that's how we'd start our day. So strictly the only reason I bought Live Scope was for bait, just because I am so sick of and tired of struggling for bait, especially when you're fishing. 30 tournaments a year. We only get 28 weekends in the summer. You know what I mean? So that's us fishing every weekend, sometimes doubles, sometimes triples. To be able to load up on bait Thursday night, throw it in my bait tank on the front of the boat, and not worry about bait all weekend, it would just be a godsend.
If you don't kill it.
Well,
we
listen,
had bait for
entirely
Sandusky.
my fault. 400 pieces of bait up there at Sandusky. I was on the shad, so I just kept catching. And Aunt Pam's given me bait before. Sometimes when you're the tournament director, you do all the planning. It's tough to find bait sometimes. I just don't have time, especially when I work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. But but yeah, so I caught 400 pieces of bait before Sandusky because I knew there was going to be a lot of people there. The boat guys, the kayak guys. I'm like, I'll just load up on bait. I'll make sure everybody's good with bait. My boat died overnight, killed all the bait, plugged it into the wrong outlet. Every piece. I opened that bait tank, about cried.
So back to the whole ban Live Scope movement. I don't think you're ever going to see the bass world ban it, just because where's the line? So it's sonar. It's just an advanced version of sonar. Everybody runs a depth finder on their boat. Most people have something decent with side scan. You're running sonar to do that. The only difference is you're looking at live sonar. So where's the line? Where's the cutoff line to what is okay to use to those people is what I don't understand. So if you want to ban Live Scope, well, you're banning a version of sonar. Do you just ban one version, or do you say, okay, we're going no electronics? To me, those people that are saying that, if they're against that technology, they're going to have to go back to bank fishing with a cane pole. Because, if you're going to ban one technology, why not ban it all? And
I truly believe that I have the same advantage with side scan. Catfishing, I have the same advantage with side scan as the guys do with forward facing sonar.
I will say this, and just while I've not used the Live Scope to catfish at all yet, but what I have done is watched catfish with it while I was crappie fishing. And you can learn a lot by watching what those fish are doing and how they're moving. I didn't even have a catfish rod with me, and learned just as much about catfishing as I had on any trip I've ever made. Learned how those fish move. I've watched them come up and eat crappie or chase them. I don't know if they got one, but I know they came up and chased them. My thing with it, number one, in tournament fishing, bait, of course, it's going to be a big help with that. Less time you spend chasing bait, the more time you can pre-fish for a tournament. Number two, I can run through an area with my side scan, mark some catfish, pull up and watch them and see what they're doing. Are they just laying there chilling? Are they actively moving around feeding? What are they doing? I just eliminated a lot of time and a lot of effort dragging an area or fishing an area because I've got Live Scope. I've always been pro Live Scope even when I didn't have it. JJ has proved that you can use it to catch catfish. He's never caught any big ones doing it, but he has got several videos of pitching a jig to smaller catfish and watching them eat it, So I think there's definitely going to be times when I can use it to target a specific fish.
Sorry, I'm reading comments. Brandon Hunter said he's caught a few nice cats on Live Scope, but dragging, drifting, and most of the traditional ways will beat Live Scope. And Muskrat says because of Fish Israel, he is a believer that Live Scope works for catfish. But Mike Greenwell makes a great point, and this is why I bought an extra money incentive for no depth finder. This is why I bought Live Scope. We fish tournaments where you have to catch bait during the tournament hours. Now, stop it right there. That's why I bought Live Scope, because most of the time I'm not required to catch my bait during tournament hours, but I'm so busy and got so much going on, I'm not catching my bait until tournament hours. And then he says an extra money incentive for no depth finder. Those were fun. I'd be out. You guys would smoke me. If I couldn't use my depth finder, I'll be dragging on the beach.
Well, once again, though, that comes back to doing your homework.
Right.
You know, I mean,
if you look at it, I'm a big fan of Navionics. I pay for the upgraded Navionics because I can almost always find fish in just looking at Navionics. But it depends. When I'm traveling, a lot of times when I'm traveling, I'll focus on flatheads because that's what I'm better at catching. And I got to be able to see that tree. I got to be able to see where it's at in order to catch a flathead. And that makes me, I get it. That makes me not the best catfisherman. But I've always said you can put me in a wheelbarrow with an oar. As long as I have a Lowrance, I'll catch any fish.
I'm with you. And you know, most of the season last season, I actually fished blind with no electronics. I had so many problems out of my graphs last year. And most of it's probably due to hauling my kayak down the road with them still attached because a kayak bounces so bad on the trailer going down the road. It's got to be hard on them. And that's, since I've got the new electronics, I'll be taking them off at least for long trips. You know, traveling to Tennessee, I'll have my graph in the truck, not on the trailer.
Mike says, I want to see you fishing in a wheelbarrow now.
It almost looked like you were in a wheelbarrow on that kayak.
Oh, come on now. Come on now. Pontoon Jody says, some people use the excuse that they can't afford live scope, but you can't blame someone for having tools to be successful. It's a choice on what you spend your money on. And I truly believe that, you know. Not everybody has the nicest graphs. And some guys, you pull up next to them, they got an Apex 20. I mean, they got a dang TV screen, 2 of them, and they're looking at side scan on each side right off of their boat. I don't have an Apex 20, and I surely don't have 2 of them. I got a Lowrance HDS 12. And but I agree with that. You know, you can't blame somebody for the tools they have. We all have different rods. We all have different sonars. My boat was sponsored to me, but my boat's only a $25,000 boat. I don't have a $90,000 Sea Arc. Cool for the guy that does, but I still don't think having more expensive tools makes anyone better than the next. At the end of the day, you still got to be a good fisherman.
Well, I mean, if you look at the King of the Tennessee tournament, I was the only one there in a kayak out of, I think there was nine or 10 people there. The rest of them were all on boats. You know, I was on a kayak. I didn't even have my graph, the GPS wouldn't work. So I couldn't even tell you how fast I was suspend drifting. I was literally watching stuff drift by to tell how fast I was drifting. And I ended up winning that tournament. You know, it was just, you develop a feeling and a gut instinct for a lot of this stuff that you can't explain to people.
Greenwell says he's got a 7-inch and a 9-inch HDS, and he does okay. I'd say he does more than okay myself.
That's what I have. I have the I think mine's a 10 or a 12, and I've got the active target with it, which is Lowrance's version of live scope. The reason I chose that, number one, I got a deal on a used unit. Number two, with the Garmin, you have to continuously dial in your gain and your settings. With Lowrance, you lose a little bit of quality over the image, but you never have to adjust it. It's all automatic. It does everything for itself. You don't have to adjust the gain. And
when I got on Chris's kayak, he had that SV9 whatever Garmin, whatever that thing was. I'd say I might as well not have a fish finder that night. We just went to spots that I knew I caught fish in before because I didn't like that Garmin at all. But I've used Lowrance for the last 2 years, and before that it was Humminbird. So Garmin's just there's too many settings. There's too much you got to play with. Same with Humminbird. I liked Humminbird, but just too much dialing in for different bodies of water. Yep.
And last year was the first time I ever marked a fish on side scan that I actually caught. Before, I had marked them on side scan, scanning through an area and then dragged through there and caught fish. But I literally have, last year at a tournament, it was Mike had just got his Take 2 kayak. I sent him a picture. I seen a fish on my graph, and I took a picture of it while I was dragging, sent it to Mike, and I was like, hey, check that out. I got a monster getting ready to hit my baits, and the rod just got folded. And it was exactly where I said it was going to be. That was the first time I'd ever done that. And I ended up doing it 3 or 4 times over the course of the year when my graphs would work. Right. It was every single tournament I would get out there and something would happen with my graph, whether it be a wiring issue or,
oh my goodness,
it was something every single tournament last year with my graphs.
You got to learn to take off your kayak while you're driving your car.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I had problems with mine on my boat bouncing around and the wires come loose.
But I take a lot of pride in how short I can launch and be on the water. It's kind of known that kayakers hog boat ramps in a lot of places. So
no,
I have it down to so much of a science that if I go to Taylorsville Lake, I can pull up in my garage, hook to my kayak, throw my rods in the truck, and be rolled out in about 5 minutes. I'm completely empty truck to loaded and going to the lake. When I pull in at the boat ramp, I can be in the water and have my truck parked, walking back to the kayak in less than 2 minutes.
Oh, nice.
So I literally can launch faster than almost anybody I see there on a boat. And I did that because we got tired of people cussing, at the boat ramps. These kayakers tying up the boat ramp, they should be over there out of the way. Yeah, I'm not going to say what we've heard, but it's been an ordeal.
And the responses Chris gave.
Yeah. There was so many times I fished with Chris, I thought we were going to have to fight at a boat ramp because he smarted off to the people that were saying something.
That's my daily life and everything we do. Gas station, restaurant, it doesn't matter what we do.
But that's why I love Chris. You get what you get, and that's what you get every single time. You don't get one Chris today and one tomorrow. You get the same Chris every time.
Every single day. That's what I love
about
him.
Like him or not, you're dealing with him.
Well, let's jump back real fast to the side scan. You were talking about how you finally caught a fish on side scan. There at the end of the year. So Chris knows how to use his side or his sonar to find fish, but he never really knew how to read side scan, things like that, which is something that I am really good at. I learned how to break down side scan real early, learning how to catfish with Joe Granada. He taught me, that was one of the biggest things he taught me, was you got to be able to read your side scan. So he gave me several pointers, and then that's all for the entire first year I catfished. That's the only thing I used. I only used side scan, and I was teaching myself how to pick out fish, how to pick out structure. So when we got to Hoover there late in the year, when everybody started struggling, man, when the water started getting colder, we really had an advantage with side scan, finding those fish grouped up on shallow ledges. And I remember when it finally clicked that that's what we should be doing. We had fished all morning. We hadn't caught a fish. Meanwhile, Jeff Tate is just absolutely wearing them suckers out. Like, he's calling me out of breath. He's caught so many fish. And I'm like, man, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just finding groups of fish and I'm dragging through them. And I'm like, okay, so, and I was like, man, I said, Jeff is just flat wearing them out. And I'm like, we got to go looking for fish. Like, we got to find hungry fish. We could see fish, but we weren't using our side scan. And I'm like, I wonder if he ain't using side scan. So I jumped on to side scan, and we started going, and I'm like, Chris, there's a fish. We were finding a single fish. And then we found this one spot. We were motoring up with the 9.9. We were going too fast to see. I stopped the motor, and right when we got down to like 2 miles an hour, I look on the side scan, and I see a group of like 9 fish off to the left. And Yak Shore Outdoors says, what's going on in here? Hello, everybody. I see a fellow kayak angler on the panel. But I see like 5 fish, and they're like real tight in a group. And I'm like, man, I'm thinking there was some bait above them too. And I told Chris, I said, I'm thinking if those are catfish, they're feeding on those shad. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to go up here, we're going to turn around, and we're going to drag baits through them and see what happens. And right where I went to turn around, I found another real tight group on the same side of the boat underneath some shad. And they were both about 30, 40 feet off the boat. And I said, let's drag through these and see what happens. And instantly we turn around, we get our boards out, and right as soon as we hit that first pot of fish, boom, boom, 2 boards on that side of the boat went down. I'm like, wait a minute, we might have just figured something out. This is like 1 o'clock. We haven't caught a fish yet. Tournament ends in 3 hours. And I'm like, we might have just figured something out. Well, both those fish were pretty good fish. They were both 30, 35-inch fish. And I'm like, okay, here we go. We got to that next pot of fish, boom, boom, boom. 3 boards went down. I said, we got to figure it out, dude. I said, let's turn around and run through these fish again. And if they don't bite, we're just going to drive till we find those little pods of fish. And we'll do 20-foot runs pulling boards through them. We ended up winning that tournament. We ended up catching 20-some fish that day. And we hadn't caught a single fish before 1 o'clock. So if you can effectively use side scan, it gives you a huge advantage, especially late in the year when those catfish start grouping up. It's how I fish at the James too. I find when I'm at the James in February, March, that's how I do it. I look for, and at the James, it's much different. There's 60, 70 fish laying on one ledge, but it really, once you learn how to break down side scan, it really helps you.
It does. And with the Lowrance, there's no worrying about setting it. Yeah, I mean, you can change your distance you're looking out, but there's no worrying about changing how many hertz it's running or this or that to get it clear. It just takes care of its own.
Right.
And that's what I like about it. Now the older generation of side scan that I was using in the Lowrance, it was the elite TI units. It was nowhere near as clear. And then the regular TI units, not the elite, just the regular 9-inch TIs, all you can pick out's a fish in a tree on those, so that's how I learned, is the same way. I'll run through there and look for the fish, and then I'll turn around and drag back through them.
Right.
And even if I don't catch them, I'll drag back through them the other way most of the time, because as Muskrat said earlier, there's times when they'll only eat it going one way. I don't know what difference that makes, but in a lake, in a river, that makes sense. You can't really drag down current.
Right.
But I mean, it happens. And in the river, I've been dragging upstream and couldn't get them. Turn around and suspend baits and go back and suspend, and you'll get them when you suspend over top of them. It just that one direction. I don't know if it's the way they're used to feeding, the way they're facing that day, the moon's pulling their tail. I can't explain it, but there's several times I've done that. So just because you don't get them the first time, don't mean you don't need to go back and try again.
They were sleeping with their mouths open, and your bait just fell right in their mouth.
Yeah.
The other way, head and woke them up.
But I can't explain why they bite one way and not the other, especially in a lake situation. The river situation makes a difference. They're facing up current, but the lake, it baffles me, but I still try it both ways, every time.
Now, one thing that I've noticed, when I first started dragging, I just had some walleye offshore boards. That's what I was dragging with. One thing that I've really noticed is the board makes the difference. And I know that you're on pro staff with BCAT, who's also one of our trail sponsors this year. It was crazy to me when we first started dragging. Chris and I learned how to drag together because, as you know, we were both anchor fishermen.
Yeah.
And we started dragging together, and we started out with those offshore boards, and that just didn't work.
I think the first time Chris ever used boards on the kayak may have been, I'm wanting to say it was Kerr. I think that's where I was at when we went over how to use the planer boards with him. We may have went over it before that, but I think most of the time before that we were in current, so we didn't really use boards that much. It was either bumping or dragging a little bit, or suspend fishing. But I'm pretty sure, and in Ohio up until the first of this year, you could only use 2 rods anyway, so planer boards didn't really help a whole lot. Actually, they hurt me at Hoover one year. I don't know what difference it made, but me and Mike were dragging right beside each other. I had my lines on planer boards, and he had his straight out the back, and he was burning me up, and I couldn't buy a bite. I took my planer boards off and started catching fish. I couldn't tell you what the difference was.
Chris said it was at Kerr Lake, and he had a blast doing it. And
Yeah.
Chris, because of what you guys showed him, was a great help to me when I started dragging. Like I said, when I fished King Cat events all the way up until July of last year, I never drug boards. I never drug boards. I never suspended. I was an anchor fisherman. And
that's,
I learned that when you go to these lakes like Wheeler and Wilson, now Wheeler, I got into the flatheads. We caught 40-some flatheads at that tournament. But in order to win those tournaments, you got to be able to pair those big flatheads with a giant blue cat to win those tournaments.
Yeah.
I was just completely out of the game. I wasn't fishing it like I should have been because I didn't know how to drag.
That's what's kind of so cool about doing all this. I mean, I've helped show Chris some stuff, and then Chris turns around and shows you, and then you put it on the internet again. And even though we're both on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok showing people how to do this, teaching that one guy, and then he comes and helps you learn and teaches you some of that. Now you've put it out there on the internet again. So how many people has learned how to pull boards because I learned, you know, and now I'm up to, I can pull 8 boards from a kayak, and most people are just like in awe about that. But if I'm on a boat, I can pull 14. You know what I mean? I just don't have enough room for rod holders on the kayak to run that many, or I would. That's
crazy. We run 2 off each side and 1 off the back of the boat. All of my tournaments are the 6-rod tournaments though. So, but I don't know, man. I don't think I could ever in my life drag anywhere without the 1 off the back of the boat, because I catch most of my fish. Most of my fish come off of that. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I took Aunt Pam to to Deer Creek and taught her how to drag. So it is. It's just it's a never ending cycle of, and that's what I enjoy about the catfish community, opposed to all those bait communities like bass and crappie, is the catfish guys. They're willing to help. You know, I've learned so much after getting waxed at a tournament, just standing there listening to the top 5 guys talk about how they fish. And you can ask them any questions, they'll tell you. And I've spent many hours standing there talking to some of the greats. You know, I remember at one, I talked to Mark Blaubelt and Ryan Lawrence for a while. I've stood there next to Catfish Chris as guys were coming up. I stood and talked to Adam Cook for a while at the James. You know, as you evolve in catfishing and as you learn the catfishing culture, yeah, we have tournaments. Yeah, we all want to win them. But the main thing that sets us apart from the bass fishermen, muskie, walleye, whatever it is, the main thing that sets all of us apart is the fact that we're willing to help the next angler. That's the biggest thing.
Even during a tournament. I mean, I've gave people bait during a tournament, you know, or somebody's called and said, hey, I'm not getting on them. What are you doing? You know, they've seen the scoreboard and see that I'm on them. And I've done the same thing in return. You know, I've called people and been like, hey, I see you're on them. What are you doing? Because I haven't had a bite in the first 3 hours. And I've been on the receiving end and the giving end both on that. And you ain't going to see that in a bass tournament. You're not going to see random Joe over here fishing and ask him, hey, bud, what are you doing? You're on them and I'm not.
He's going to jump on a boat and fight you.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be an exchange of information at the boat ramp later after the turn. After I take your money, I'll tell you is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to pay to get this information.
And it's not like that here. And that's what I try. I talk to so many people every day, finding sponsors for the trail and whatnot. And when they ask me, you know, they ask me what's different about the catfishing industry than the bass industry. Like, I've gone after some big players like Amsoil and things like that. I've gone after huge sponsorships, and they all give money to bass and walleye. And when they ask me what's the difference in catfish and walleye and catfish and bass, that's it. You know, I tell them that catfishing is a family community, and we are competitive. Where we all, I mean, every now and then you'll get some of us bickering back and forth. But you and I can bicker back and forth at the ramp before we launch at Taylorsville, and I can be out there half the day and know I'm not catching anything and call you, and you'll say, dude, I'm hammering them over here. Come over and fish with me. And that's the difference. I do the same. I do it all the time. People ask me, are you catching fish? Yeah, come on. You know, what are you using for bait? I'll tell them. There's only one time I didn't tell people what I was using for bait because I knew nobody had any. We showed up to fish a tournament at the Ohio River, and we had all common carp because we were hammering them on common carp there the last 2 weeks before that. And guys were asking me what I had, and I'm like, I just got the secret sauce, you know. And we got back to the boat ramp, and I was telling them, I was like, it was all common carp. And we won that tournament. And it was all common carp, which has been on fire on the Ohio River the last couple of years. I'm giving everybody my secret here. But they all laughed. They said, we didn't have common carp. You could have told us. I'm like, I know you didn't have it. That's why it was a joke. But I'm the same. Like, every time I show up to the boat ramp, before all the people that are fishing one of my events launch, I make sure they got all the bait they need. Man, you got all your safety equipment. You guys got hooks. You got swivels. You know, I just make sure that when people launch from the ramp at one of our events, they got everything they need, and they're not going to run into any issues. They need bait, and I got it. It's theirs. They need hooks, and I got extra. It's theirs, you know. And that's what I like. And Fish Shizzle says the secret bait is pork loin. Down in Louisiana, it was pork loin for sure. So yeah, no, that's the biggest selling factor for the catfish community. It's truly somewhere you can go and be a part of a community.
I went to Tennessee for, I think it was our second tournament this year. I spent more time catching bait for people. It was when they had the YouTube gathering. I spent more time catching bait for people and giving it away than I did pre-fishing while I was down there. Not before the tournament. Back then we used we went to Catfish Sumo, that his headquarters at his actual shop there, for our tournament check-in, which we did the night before the tournament. I called Mike. I said, hey man, is it a big deal if I don't make check-in tonight? I'm going to go get bait. And he's like, well, are you getting everybody bait? I'm like, yeah. So I actually was late getting to Catfish Sumo for the check-in, but nobody cared because I brought everybody bait back with me. Me and Chris went and I think we had 200 skipjack when we came back. We made an hour drive up to another dam, and then an hour catching bait, and then an hour's drive back to Catfish Sumo to make sure everybody had bait for that tournament, and
That's awesome.
You don't see that anywhere else.
Nowhere else.
In the bass world, if you're catching them on one certain bait and everybody finds out about it, you're probably going to go buy every bait at the local bait shop in that. That's just the way they do things.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that either, because that's the reason we go out of town into different cities, is to bring business to those guys. So those small mom and pop bait shops that always seem to be the guy there at 9 o'clock when you ain't got no bait, but he's got 4 or 5 skipjack he's willing to sell you. Those are awesome too. We've hit the 1 hour mark, guys. As I've said, this is the Mid-Ohio Catfishing Tournament Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Jeffers. So real fast for everybody just jumping in, we are going to, with Mid-Ohio Catfishing being our headline sponsor, we are going to hear a word from them real fast, and then we'll be right back to continue our talk with RYAN BORTZ. So here we go. Oh, is it going to play? There we go.
Well, grab your boat, we're heading for a fishing hole somewhere in the state of Ohio. You may fish in Sandusky, but we ain't gonna count no muskie. It's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. You may drag out to Lake Dillon, it depends on how you're feeling. It's the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. It don't cost much to enter, you may just be a winner at the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. At the Mid-Ohio Catfish Tournament Trail. Come on down and join us, you hear?
All right, we're back. Sorry about that. I need to jump up and grab a water, so I figured that was the perfect time to do that. And it gets out the little video that we made with Jamie's song. Thought that was pretty cool. Figured we'd add that in here every now and then. So the Mid-Ohio Catfishing Tournament Trail was started by us last year. Kind of what you saw there was you saw a lot of people that come out to fish. We serviced 75 different teams, 150 different anglers last year. All competed for a chance to fish in the Best of Ohio Championship that we hold at the end of the year on the Ohio River. And fortunately, me and Chris were able to win that one. But Sean Dolphin, which is a great angler from here in local Ohio, won the Angler of the Year race. This year, we have added a length division trail, which I'm sure Ryan's going to compete in some of the events. That will be for kayakers, boaters, and bank fishermen who cannot fish in a boat with a live well. So really excited about that. We have 20 tournaments on the traditional weight side. We have 12 tournaments on the kayak side. You need to fish 5 of those kayak tournaments to qualify for the championship, which will be on Hoover. And you have to fish 7 of the boat tournaments to qualify for the championship to fish on the Ohio River. The way we do it on the weight side is the 20 teams that qualify for the championship will then vote on where we fish at on the Ohio River, anywhere from the border from West Virginia to the border of Indiana, and anywhere in between. We pick a boat ramp. We all vote on it. And where I say we all, like I'm going to make it. Who knows if I'll make it this year. But we all pick where we fish, and then that's where the championship's held. Those numbers also, 5 required events for Angler of the Year for the kayak division, 7 required events for Angler of the Year for the boat side. Everything this year has been inflated on payouts. The Angler of the Year on the boat side pays like $7,500. I think the kayak side pays a total of like $5,000, I believe. The championship for the boat division pays almost $10,000. The championship for the kayak division, I believe, pays almost $5,000. And the first tournament of the year that we're having in Gallipolis is a free entry event. We're going to take a limited number of boats. We're going to cut it off at 200. It's free entry. All you have to do is buy and wear a Mid-Ohio Catfishing t-shirt. It'll have Gallipolis on top of it, so we know that it is the event t-shirt. And that one's paying out $5,000 for first place. What is it? $5,000 for first place, $3,500 for second place, $1,000 for third place, $1,000 big fish.
And I'm registered for that.
You are, and I think Kayak Mike is fishing it with Chris. So now that I've got the entire Mid-Ohio Catfishing spiel back, again, this is the Mid-Ohio Mid-Ohio Catfishing Podcast. I'm your host and your tournament director, Corey Jeffers, and we're here talking live with RYAN BORTZ, the National Kayak Trail champion for last year. So, Catfishing Chaos asks, is it one guy per boat in the length division? The way we're going to do the length division is we're not going to limit how many people can be in the boat, but we are going to limit the rods. And the reason we're going to do that is the kayak guys have one guy on the kayak. And here in Ohio, you're allowed fishing with 3 rods. So if there's 2 guys in the boat and you guys have 6 rods, that is an unfair advantage for the kayak guys. If you want to have 2 guys in the boat, no problem. You're each going to have to pay an entry fee, but you're only going to be allowed to have 3 rods in use. That will all be coming out here soon. And same thing on the bank. You're only allowed to be using 3 rods. If 2 of you guys are sitting side by side, I guess you guys, 2 bank fishermen sitting side by side could use their own rods as long as you're not caught reeling a fish in on somebody else's rod, and you have to net and measure your own fish. So all that will be coming out soon. We are still hammering out the rules. The first kayak event is that same weekend, except it's going to be on Sunday. So we're all going to be fishing that big boat tournament on April 6th. The first kayak event is then on April 7th, and that will be in Cincinnati. We're going to launch from Riverside Boat Ramp and Ball Fields there. So,
and you can fish both, right?
You can fish both if they're on separate days or separate times, but you cannot fish both if they're running together. So, like, there's a couple tournaments where we're driving really far away, so the boats and the kayaks are at the exact same time. You cannot fish both if we're fishing together, but you are allowed to fish both. Like, there's some where the boats fish in the morning, kayakers fish at night, and vice versa, or kayakers fish on a different day than the boats. In that scenario, you can fish them both.
So, like Gallipolis, I can leave there, drive down to Cincinnati, and fish the kayak event the next day.
Yeah, Chris and I are doing the same, as well as a bunch of other people. There's going to be a caravan of people leaving Gallipolis to go to Cincinnati. So I'm thinking that first event in Cincinnati seems like it's going to be a good one.
Which is my complete plan as of now, but that, you know how plans happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that said they're going to do the same. I think Jeff Tate's doing the same. Chris and I are doing the same. I would imagine Mike's going to do it. He's got to go back to Cincinnati anyways.
So that's only, what, a 4-hour drive?
No, it's not even 4 hours, I don't think. From Gallipolis.
I think it's 5 from my house to Gallipolis. So,
I don't think so. Let's see. If it's 4 hours, I'd be really surprised because it's only 2 hours from my house to Gallipolis. If Mike was in here, he'd probably be able to tell us pretty easily. Let's see. Cincinnati. No, it's 2 hours and 28 minutes.
Oh, that's nothing. That you got time to go get bait between them that way.
I got
bait and still sleep.
I got a lot of scoop. I don't need a lot of time to get bait.
No. It ain't as easy as everybody thinks it is, but it does make it easy.
Listen, I went out with Joe Hadfields. It's easy.
Yeah, but when you got a whole river to worry about finding it on, Joe kind of knows where to go and where to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll see.
That gives you a little. I did the same thing.
Oh, Aaron said he's going to make it too. I hope
my first time with it was on Joe's boat at Sandusky, and we went out the morning before the King Cat tournament up there, and was using live scope. We threw and got a couple of shad, and we scanned around and looked for some catfish, and that's kind of how we ended up fishing the tournament based on what we saw there. But we didn't want to be over there at the bridges with the other 7,000 boats that was over there that day.
You know what's crazy is that Sandusky event, when I fished it on the kayak the next day, I only caught 5 fish all day. I was cool enough to take you guys out for bait, but you guys weren't cool enough to invite me over there to fish with you. So while you guys were catching 50 fish, I caught 5. I hooked into 2 30-pound sheephead at the same time, and I was getting drug around the lake like a rag doll. I couldn't get them in the boat. I'm almost getting hit by jet skis. I'm fighting 2 30-pound sheephead on each side of the kayak, dragging the anchor through the mud. It won't even hold me. So I'm trying to pull the anchor out. This one's pulling, rocking the kayak this way. This one's pulling, rocking it that way. It was a mess. The people on my TikTok live were dying.
My first time to Sandusky, it was still the 2-rod limit. I might have been allowed 3. I can't remember. It seems like it was a 3-rod limit, but it was 2022. My first time up there, and I've got double hook rigs on.
Oh my goodness.
at one point I had 5 channel cats laying at my feet, didn't have a rod in the water, and I'm like, I've got to measure these fish to score them before I can even put a rod back. I was sitting there spot locked. I had dragging rigs on with double hook rigs, and ended up just spot locking. And by the time I would get this rod cast out and reach and get this rod to cast it back out, this rod would have a fish on. I was literally casting this rod, waiting to reel in this fish, and it was just insane.
I love Sandusky. It's one of the funnest places. Sandusky is the exact same as Louisiana in October.
It should only be a 4-hour tournament, because after 8 hours, your arms are just ripped.
Yeah, I feel like you got noodles. Now imagine when I went to Louisiana the first time in October, it was the exact same way as Sandusky. If you put 6 rods out, you were catching 6 fish within 10 minutes, and they were all 40 to 60 pounds. So you thought you were wore out after 8 hours in Sandusky. 8 hours in Louisiana in October will just flat wear you out.
And you have enough current down there to bump if you want. I'm just saying.
I couldn't imagine bumping in that, dude. You'd be wore out.
That's my favorite way to fish. I'll put it. It's not always the most productive, but it's always the most fun.
I've never caught one bumping, but I've heard they'll rip the rods right out of your hand.
Oh, which my first trip bumping. My first bumping fish was 58.8 pounds. So,
jeez.
Yeah,
I'd get anybody hooked.
Yeah, that was my first bumping fish. I was down there with Bob from Bobcat Outdoors, and he actually called me. I'd messaged him about buying bait, and he's like, "Man, I ain't got none." He's like, he sent me somebody's number. He's like, "Get a hold of them. They'll probably have some frozen bait they'll sell you." It was my first trip down there, and he called me back about 10 minutes later. He's like, "I'm going to make a bait run." He's like, "Why don't you just meet me at the boat ramp?" I'm like, "Bet, I'm there." He calls me back while I'm getting in the truck, and it was me and Mark Bennett. And he's like, "Hey, by the way, just bring your bumping rods. I don't think bait's going to take long." So we go out and we catch skipjack for like an hour. And I think we ended up with like 52 skipjack or something. And I think Bob caught 50 of them. And he's like, "Well, we got enough bait to last for a pretty good while for you." He said, "Let's go try bumping." And I'm like, "All right, where are we going?" And he just pointed at the hydros, and I'm like, "We're already up there." He's like, "No, we're going in the whitewater."
Oh my God.
And Bob's got like a little 17 or 18 foot center console boat. And I'm like, if he's brave enough to do it, I'm brave enough to go with him. And we go over there, and we just, it was a learning curve at first, but once me and Mark got it figured out, I mean, we dialed it in, we started catching some fish, but that fish hit. And I mean, I from bass fishing, it was kind of like fishing a jig in reverse. If you've ever bass fished, when that fish hit, I instantly knew I had a fish. So I reached to reach and grab the reel handle to click the reel in gear. By the time I got it clicked in gear, it was already smoking my thumb. I mean, I already had a blister on my thumb. I got it clicked in gear, and all I could do was hold on. And I'm like, "That's a gooder one, Bob." He's like, "Yeah, I'll kill the trolling motor so you can catch up to it." I mean, it had that PC fun, and I had the drill or the drag cranked down pretty good on it. So he was pulling hard, and Bob finally got the boat, the trolling motor kicked off, and we got caught up to the fish. And when I got straight up and down, that's when I knew I had something. I knew I had a really good fish. And I finally pull it up, and Bob's like, "That's a 40-pound fish." Well, we get it in the boat, and I'm like, "That's more than 40." but they were running like 30 or 35,000 at the dam that day, and at Chickamauga Dam, that's some current.
That's
I mean, it was probably 3-4 mile an hour current, and a 60-pound fish on a bumping rod for anybody is a rush. I mean, I don't care who you are, but for my first one, that hooked me.
I guarantee it.
So.
Now, why don't you, real fast for anybody in chat that don't know about bumping, explain your rig for us. How you rig up bumping.
So you have a 3-way rig, and I like my sinker leader to be half the length of my bait leader. So you got a 3-way swivel. One side, I always come off sideways going down to my sinker, and then the one that comes straight out with my main line, that's the one with my bait on it. And it's usually about 3 foot average from my swivel to my bait, and then it's about 1.5 foot average from my swivel down to my sinker. And that's just the starting point. You may have a 6-inch leader going to your sinker if the fish are closer to the bottom. You can add a peg float, and then The general rule of thumb is if you've got 3-mile-an-hour current, you let the boat go backwards at 1.5 miles an hour, and there's a sweet spot. You'll find you'll let line out, and then it'll eventually get out to a sweet spot where you're not letting any line out, but you're going the same speed as your bait as you bump it up and down and bounce it across the bottom. And you're holding the rod the entire time, so you're constantly pick it up and drop it, pick it up and drop it. And what that does is when you come back over a ledge or a little sand ripple or something like that, those fish are tucked in, hiding behind that, out of that current, waiting to ambush bait. Well, your bait's coming down just like any other bait. It's bouncing down the bottom of the river, just like it would naturally be coming through the dam or something. And when it comes by them, they just grab it, and usually they grab it and they go. There's usually not a pick it up and sit there with it. It's a pick it up and they turn and leave the country with it. A 5-pound fish can take the rod out of your hand real quick.
Really?
And you may bump for 30 minutes or an hour and not get a bite. But then when you do, you've relaxed your grip, you've kind of got lazy, you're just in the rhythm, you're going through the motions, and then all at once the rod's trying to leave your hand.
Huh.
I actually took a cast net, and an old ripped up cast net, and cut the loop off the handle and made a lanyard to go around my wrist for my bumping rod.
Have you almost lost one?
Several times.
Really?
If you go back on my TikTok and look, I almost lost my rod on that 58.8. I mean, I almost lost my rod with that fish.
That's unbelievable. Jeremy Turns wants to know what your biggest catfish is.
I didn't put it on scales. I call it an 80. It was at the Falls of the Ohio.
I just watched a video of a guy that caught 100 there on YouTube.
There was 2, I think, caught in the 90 to 100-pound range this year.
Yeah, I know. We went down there looking for him, and I kept breaking off.
You definitely don't go there with weak line.
Don't go there with weak line, and don't go there with if you're short on tackle.
Yeah. You definitely take a pocket full of sinkers and another pocket full of hooks.
Jeremy wants to know if that was a blue or a flathead.
It was a blue.
Yeah.
It was 47.5 inches long.
Gee, Manny, that's a good fish.
And my biggest flathead was 47 3/4.
I did
2 weeks apart. 2 weeks apart, sitting in the same hole.
I did a TikTok live, I don't know, about a week ago. And when you're live on anything, that's the number one question you see. What's your PB? What's your PB? And let me tell you how weird it is to say, oh, well, my personal best is 118 pounds.
Yeah.
People are like, okay, yeah, whatever, buddy.
Whatever. Scroll down 2 videos, bud, and you'll see it.
Go back and take a look. It's on there. It's just, forever. I got so used for 3 years. My PB was 72 pounds. I couldn't break it. I went to the James all the time trying to beat it, and I never could. And people kept asking me. And I just got used to saying 72 pounds. And that fella, he said, he's like, what's your PB? I'm like, oh, it's 70. It's 118 pounds. And he commented back. He said, LOL, how big is it really? And I was like, oh, really? It's 118 pounds. That's no joke. So it gets a little weird saying that to people now when they ask me how big my PB is. It's unrealistic. Like anybody who tells you their PB is 118 pounds, you're like, was it really though? Like 118 specific.
And unless you're Tim Scott, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Jeremy says, I'll be in that 100-pound class one day. I hope you are, man. I'll tell you, there was nothing like the rush of lifting that fish over the boat. I just want to go back to that small little window of when he floated to the top and I thought it was a sea turtle. I want to go back to that moment, man. If I can just go back to that moment when I saw that fish float up, because when I told the story, if you guys want to see the story about that fish, I did it on Catfish Weekly a couple of weeks ago, and I went to the story in depth. It's an awesome story. But as I told him that story right before we caught that fish, I broke off on one that I truly believe was bigger. I mean, I'll tell 100 people that I thought that fish was bigger because I fought that fish for 34 minutes or something like that, 28, 34 minutes. And I've never fought a fish that long. Have you ever fought a fish for 30 minutes?
The one I got at the falls was so that was actually the same scenario for me. I was up there fishing. It was my first trip up there, and I was fishing. I moved over to a spot, had a rod go down. I fought this fish for 20 or 30 minutes. Could not do nothing with it. I mean, I just couldn't get it off the bottom. It drug me in the kayak all over that place. And I didn't have a spot lock motor back then. Or no, I did. I did have the spot lock motor. but I was afraid it was going to flip me. It was pulling so hard sideways in that current. So I just turned the spot lock off and let the fish take the kayak where it wanted to go. And my arms got so tired that I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to tighten the drag down. This fish is gonna have to come up, or I'm gonna have to go in. One way or the other, something's got to give. I reached down and clicked the drag, and it clicked one time, and the fish popped the line.
Jeez.
Heartbreak of the year. I go back to the same exact spot where I just hooked that one, spot lock, dropped my other 3 rods down because I was fishing with 4 rods back then. And I dropped my other 3 rods down, and I'm retying the rig on to the one that I just broke off on that fish, and the other front rod goes down. And I just drop this rod and, throw it down in the floor and reach and get this one. And I'm like, oh crap, my arms are never going to take this again. I mean, as soon as I picked up on the rod, I knew immediately, I'm like, I'm never going to fight this that long to get it in. And I got lucky. And I think it was about 16 minutes on the video. I had the entire fight on video. And I finally pulled it up, and I used the HydroWeb HD 40 net on the kayak just because it's so small and you can take it with you so easy. I didn't think I was going to get the fish in that net, but I got its head in there enough to stop the fish from being able to swim, and then I reached over and grabbed it and got it in. But
that's awesome. See, that was the problem that Chris and I dealt with. We have the biggest net RS net makes, and I didn't know how we were going to get that fish in the net. I'm like, it's in, and when you watch the video, I'm screaming, is it in the net? Is it in the net? And he's like, yes, yes, no, yes, no. And I'm like, just get it in the net. Like, what's the problem? The fish is there. So,
and people make fun of the sea turtle comment thing. I mean, you even talk about it, but when you're out there in the dark, if you don't have your headlight on and aimed at exactly what you're looking at, you can make out shapes, and that's about it, especially
and all I saw was something this big come to the top of the water.
Yeah.
I mean, and here's the crazy thing. So we got back from that trip. I looked at Chris, he looks at me, and he said, what are we going to do about the boat? And I'm like, well, so right now the entire live well's tore out of the boat. All the lights are off the boat. We're replacing them all. New trolling motor, live scope. We rewired the entire front of the boat. I've got a guy making an even bigger. I have an 80-gallon live well on there right now. I have a guy making a 100-gallon live well with one big door. He just came today to take the measurements. I mean, we are completely reworking the entire boat, all because we caught a 100-pound fish. Now, will we ever catch another one? I hope so, but I'll tell you, I'll be prepared the next time.
And that's the thing with this sport. Like, most of what we're doing, especially in the kayak world, has never been done.
Right.
I mean, the first of this year, most people were running 4 rods. I mean, the typical Justin Johnson, 2 out the front and 2 out the back. And there's a few of us that were trying to run 6, but it was very few. And when I figured out how to strap a rod rack on the back of a kayak and run 8 and 10 rods, game changer. Now, when you pull up at the first of this year, nobody had a rod rack on a kayak. Now, when you pull up at the boat ramp, it's the standard.
Right.
So,
yeah. I mean, Chris and I are picking up another kayak next week. He got another one, and we're setting it up the exact same way with the rod rack and everything for me. So
the rod rack he has is the first prototype rod rack I built.
I don't know why you don't have them things for sale somewhere, like on Monster Rod Holders website or something.
I'm lazy. They're crazy expensive to build.
Really?
I mean, they're the ones I build because I build them so sturdy and such thick and wide aluminum. Now you can build them, what I call the generic ones. Go to Tractor Supply and buy the little 1.5-inch angle and build it. But I've had enough rods get ripped off of kayaks now that I don't play when it comes to my rod holders and my mounts.
Right. Yeah, but you don't want anything ripped off your boat, that's for sure.
If it's spend $200 on aluminum today, or take a chance on losing 3 or 4 rods in this year, I'm going to spend the $200 today and not buy any rods and reels this year.
Right. Well, Ryan, we're getting to the end of the show here. I know, like me, you have a plethora of people that support you and sponsors that support you. So I figured I'd give you a couple minutes here if you want to give any of them a shout out, talk about the gear you use, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Absolutely. You mentioned BCAT planer boards earlier. Brian and Kim Stryker, they're local in Ohio to you, well, somewhat local to you.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing people with great products. Can't say enough about them. And I have been through a lot of different planer boards, absolute a bunch. I tried to make my own and couldn't make boards that pull the way theirs do.
No, they're the best pulling board on the market, in my opinion. They're a solid board.
And they're still evolving and trying different things. You know, they have, in my opinion, the best boards out there, and they're always trying to make it better. Yep. You know, so they don't quit. So BCat boards, and then Chris Flores with Muddy River Catfishing. Chris was I was using his rods and a mixture of all different rods, and we got linked up together, and now he's my rod sponsor. You know, I mean, I can't say enough about it. I contribute his rods and the action on those Blue Cat rods to my success in the sport. Steve Douglas with Monster Rod Holders, absolutely love him. Steve's a great guy. He's local to me in Kentucky, which is why I started buying them in the first place. You know, my dad always said, keep your money at home and it'll come back to you. And I firmly believe, you know, if Steve Douglas needed a pole barn built, he'd probably call me to come give him a price on it, you know, because he's the same way. And yeah, I've never had a problem with a Monster Rod Holder failing. I don't think I've ever even heard of one failing. So it's great gear, a local guy, and I love Steve to death. You know, Steve has his ways, but you get what you get, like we was talking about with Chris.
Right.
He's going to be the same guy today as he is tomorrow, and probably a year from now. And he built his business from the ground up. You know, that says something about anybody right there. Absolutely. Steve started out with building rod holders in his basement, standing in water. I mean, I've literally seen the pictures. He's standing in 3 inches of water in his basement, welding rod holders together. and you know, that goes a long way with me. Just somebody that put in the work and earned what they've got. Right. And Steve taught probably more about catfishing than me or you'll ever dream about through his YouTube channel. You know, I mean,
that's how I got started. That's who I found first when I went to YouTube looking.
Every one of us, you know, I mean, Steve Douglas, if you search catfish on YouTube, it's going to be him or Justin Johnson now, since Steve's slacked up on the YouTube scene. But those three, and then I'm not really pro staff, but Catfish Sumo, he really does a lot for our kayak side of the sport. His hooks are all I will use. I'll say that. I mean, all I will use. They're a lot like a Mustad Demon Circle hook. They're a little bit thicker, and I've never had one to fail. You know, great hookup ratio, and I've never had one to fail. So those are the ones that really support me. Daniel from Never Lost Anchors. Daniel was the first one to give me a pro staff position, and I still use his anchors today.
I use his anchors too.
Yeah, I mean, I have lost them, but most of them were my fault.
I've lost one, but you can't throw it over top of a barge rope and expect to get it back.
Well, I threw one over the side of my boat and had a quick clip on the end of it, like you clip to the front of your boat for a tie-on rope, and it came unclipped while I was throwing the anchor, and the anchor went this way and the clip went that way.
That's a hard feeling.
I lost one pulling a boat and truck and trailer out of the lake down here at Taylorsville. I used my anchor and snagged it, took the rope over to the boat ramp, and we pulled the boat and truck and trailer up, got it almost out of the water, and the rope broke. So that's still laying there at the boat ramp somewhere. That's it. That's about it right now. Isaiah House Treatment Center, they've been big supporters for me since I started this thing. I can't say enough about them. They saved my life. You know what I mean? Without them, I wouldn't be here to do this. So
that's awesome, man. That really brings your story full circle right there.
Yep.
So, well, cool, man. It has been an awesome time. I know you and I became friends a few years ago. So when I thought about who I wanted on the show, like I said, you were on the list early, and I knew I'd get you on here in the off season so we don't have anglers that are fishing. So I appreciate you coming on. Shout out to all those guys that help you be successful. We all have them. You know, we all have those guys that stand behind us, and no matter what's going on, no matter what they hear, no matter what dramas people tries to start or what's going on in the catfishing world, they stand firm behind you. You know, for me, mine's a whole different look than you. Although I'm not pro staff with BCat, he's helped me out several times. He gave me some defective boards that he says were defective. They weren't defective. The things were just fine, but the little nick in the corner, the foam wasn't quite right. I mean, you know how he is.
Yeah, he's very picky. He adjusts every set of clips that he sends out.
He also hand deburrs every foam, every board. I mean, the guy is very
Yep.
meticulous. So huge shout out to him. He gave me some boards last year just for taking him fishing, which was really cool. I had a great time fishing with him. My sponsors are I'm obviously on a different rod team. I mean, everything about us is different, but I will tell you, I'm switching back to Monster rod holders. I'm not on the Monster rod holder team, but I've talked with Steve several times, and I believe that Steve is really genuine, down to earth. And there's many people out there trying to be like him, but people can't be like Steve. He makes the best rod holder on the market. So I'm switching back to Monster rod holders just as because I like their rod holders. But I've got
From the looks of your boat seats, you might ought to switch to his diet plan.
Oh, here we go. I knew that was going to come up. Mine didn't rip. Chris's did. So mine's starting to. But no, I've got Toughest Frickin' Rods, Angler Innovations, Ohio Ridge Outdoors, and then the people that jump on the trail too, Fisherman's Warehouse. There's a bunch of them. So there's for all the sponsors out there, and I'm really bad at naming them all. We just signed up Bob Mann, the original Two Hook Leaders, the other day. So
Bob's a great guy. I met him at CatCon.
He is. Bob is a pretty cool dude. We had some really good fellowship on the phone. So, but yeah, we're at an hour 30. That's about when I like to cut this thing off, so I have a little time with the kids before they go to bed. But Ryan, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody in the comments tonight. As I said, I do this show weekly. It hasn't really been aired on the YouTube side very well. It's been extremely popular on the Facebook side. I'm hoping to expand into the YouTube world a little more. As I'm going to start doing my like how-to videos, like how to tie knots and things, I'm going to be putting those on YouTube. And maybe one day Chris and I will actually go fishing again. And if we do,
I just did a how to set up planer boards video. If anybody needs that, if they're buying boards and don't know how to put them together.
What's your channel? RYAN BORTZ.
RYAN BORTZ Blue Collar Fishing, but I put that on Facebook and TikTok. I don't even think I posted it to YouTube.
Is it RYAN BORTZ Blue Collar Fishing on TikTok as well?
Yep. Blue Collar Life, I think. I can't remember.
All right. Ryan, you search RYAN BORTZ Blue Collar, he'll come up. So check out his page, guys. If you guys don't already follow him, if you don't already follow me on any of my stuff, Ohio River Catfishing on TikTok, River Catfishing everywhere else, I would appreciate the follow. Jeremy, I try to do it every Wednesday. Sometimes Wednesdays get a little hectic, so we do it on Thursday. But most of the time it is going to be every Wednesday. I'm not sure who we're going to have next week. I need a team like Lyle's got, line guest up for me. Because it gets a little challenging when you got to line your own guest up. But we've had a great time with you guys tonight. I hope you enjoyed our first episode with the takeoff video that we made. Huge shout out to Jamie Rose, who sang that song, wrote, produced, and sang that song. I made the video. He is on Team Rose Catfishing, and he is doing all of this catfishing and stuff in name of his son who passed away. So he is an awesome guy. We enjoy having him on the trail, and we are extremely thankful for the song and all of the help that he offers the trail. So with that, guys, we are going to sign out. Thanks, guys, for all the comments. Thank you, of course, Ryan, for being on here. And if anybody has any more comments, questions, concerns, reach out to Ryan and ask him directly. Feel free to message me, and we will get you your answers. But until then, we hope to see you guys on the water. Take care.